Introduction. I first met the Cards when I was 7 years old, living in Tocopesia, a small Chilean port town nestled between the glacial Pacific Ocean and the mountainous plateaus of Tarapacá, the driest region on earth, where not a drop of rain has fallen in centuries. The town merchants would close up shop at noon until 5 every afternoon because of the extreme heat. My father, Jaime, would lower the metal shutter of his Casa Ukrainia, Ukraine house, which sold feminine undergarments and household items, and go play billiards at Crazy Abrams, a Lithuanian Jewish widower who had washed up here under mysterious circumstances. In this warehouse where women never set foot, normally competing merchants declared a momentary truce and gathered around a green table where they showed off their virility by making canyon shots. According to Jaime's philosophy, a child's brain was already formed by age 7 and should be treated as an adult. So on my 7th birthday, he allowed me to go with him to play billiards. The deafening noise made by the balls striking each other and the white and red trails they left across the olive green felt failed to impress me. What did catch my eye and fascinated me was a card castle. Crazy Abraham was obsessed with building large castles out of cards. He would leave these huge and imposing constructions, no two of which were alike, on the bar counter far from any drafts until he got drunk and intentionally knocked them down, only to immediately begin building another. Jaime would mockingly tell me to ask the loony why he did this. Smiling sadly, he would give a child the answer he did not wish to give to adults. I am imitating God, little one. The one who creates us, destroys us, and with what's left of us, he rebuilds. As an antidote to the boredom of provincial life, my father would invite a group of friends over to play cards for hours on Saturday evenings and Sundays after lunch, while my mother, Sara Felicidad, the only woman present, served beer and canapes like a shadow. The rest of the week the cards slept under the lock and key imprisoned in a dresser. These decks fascinated me, but I was forbidden to touch them. According to my parents, they were only for adults. This gave me the idea that cards, wild beasts that could be tamed only by a wise man, Jaime, in this instance, had magical powers, as the players used beans instead of chips. Every Monday, my mother, perhaps to release the pain she felt at being excluded from the game, boiled them for soup, which I would slurp down with the feeling that it was giving me some of their powers. Being the son of Russian immigrants, my physical appearance was quite different from that of native Chileans and left me without any friends. My parents were wrapped up for 10 hours a day in the Casa Ukrainia and had no time for me. Weighted down by the silence and solitude, I began examining the furniture in their room in hopes of finding a detail that would reveal the faces hidden behind their masks of indifference. In a corner of the closet, between the perfumed clothes of Sara Felicidad, I found a small, rectangular metal box. My heart began to beat faster. Something told me I was about to receive an important revelation. I opened it. Residing inside was a tarot card called the Chariot. It showed a prince driving a flaming vehicle. Tongues of fire had been added with lines of black ink and colored with yellow and red watercolors. Who had gone to the trouble to transform the original drawing by adding flames? Lost in my thoughts, I did not hear my mother coming in. Caught in the act, I confessed my guilt and handed her the card. She took it from me reverently, clutched it to her chest, and broke out sobbing. When she recovered her calm, she told me how her late father had always carried this card in a pocket of his shirt, close to his heart. He had once been a Russian ballet dancer who was over 6 feet tall and a leonine mane of blonde hair. I fell in love with my Jewish grandmother. He fell in love with my Jewish grandmother and followed her into exile, although under no obligation to do so. In Argentina, clumsy as he was in everything concerning the details of everyday life, he climbed on top of a barrel full of alcohol. Still holding the oil lamp in his hand, the liquid burst into flames, and my grandfather was burned alive. Sara Felicidad was born 1 month after this atrocious death. One day, her mother, Jashi, told her how she had found the card intact among the ashes of her beloved husband. One night after the burial, the flames of the chariot appeared without anyone having drawn them. My mother harbored no doubt about the veracity of this story. In my own childish innocence, I believed it too. When I was 10 years old, my parents sold their business and announced that we were moving to Santiago, the capital. Losing my home so abruptly plunged me into a venomous mental fog. I expressed my suffering by growing fat, transformed into a little hippopotamus. I dragged myself to school, eyes glued to the ground, under the impression that the sky was a cement vault. My pain was compounded by the rejection of my classmates when they noticed that my penis had no foreskin in the showers after gym class. "Wandering Jew," they shouted, while spitting at me. The son of a diplomat recently arrived from France spit on the back of my card and stuck it to my forehead. Bursting with laughter, my classmates shoved me in front of a mirror. It was one of the arcana from the Tarot of Marseille, the Hermit. I saw it in the infamous portrait, an individual with no territory, alone, numb with cold, feet injured, walking for an eternity in search of what? Something, anything at all, that would give him an identity, a place in the world, a reason to live. The old man was holding up a lamp. What held up my millennial soul? Faced by the cruelty of my companions, I felt that my weight was a pain that had been transported for centuries. Could this lamp be my consciousness? And what if I was not a vacant body, a mass inhabited only by anguish, but a strange light that traveled through time, borrowing various vehicles of flesh in search of that unthinkable being my grandparents called God? What if the unthinkable was beauty? Something like a pleasant explosion broke through the barriers, imprisoning my mind. My sorrow was swept away like dust. With the anxiety of a shipwrecked survivor, I set off in search of a port where young poets got together. It was called the Café Iris. Iris, the messenger of gods, she who united heaven and earth and was the feminine complement of Hermes. And someone had stuck upon my forehead a hermit. This was the cafe temple where I would meet friends, actors, poets, puppeteers, musicians, and dancers. I would grow up among people who were desperately seeking beauty like me. During the 40s, during the 40s, drugs were not in style. Our conversations, fueled by creative fervor, lingered over a bottle of wine that no sooner empty would be replaced by another one. At the break of dawn, famished and drunk, we would run to the botanical gardens to burn off the alcohol. A 60-year-old French woman, Marie Lefebvre, lived with her 18-year-old boyfriend, Nenny, in a narrow basement apartment facing the park. She was poor, but there was always a full pot of soup simmering in her kitchen, a chaotic magma that contained the leftover food the neighboring restaurant gave her in return for card readings for its customers. While her naked lover snored away, Marie, wrapped in a Chinese dressing gown, served us bowls of the delicious broth in which we could find fish, meatballs, vegetables, grains, noodles, cheese, chicken, liver, beef belly, and lots of other delicacies. We would then do a tarot reading, using cards she drew herself on the stomach of her lover, who even a cannon blast would not wake up. This bizarre contact with the cards was decisive for me. Thanks to this woman, tarot remains forever connected with generosity and boundless love in my heart. "60 years have gone by since then, and following her example, I have always given card readings for free. At a time when I felt like a prisoner on the cultural island that my country was then, Marie Lefebvre predicted, 'You will travel across the entire world without stopping until the end of your life. But hear this well, and when I say world, I am talking about the entire universe. When I say end of your life, I am talking about your current incarnation. In reality, you will live in other forms for as long as the universe lives.' Later in France, I worked with Marcel Marceau, who bestowed on me the greatest honor ever granted in his troupe to show, while motionless in a suggestive pose, the placards announcing the title of his pantomimes. This was how, transformed into a statue of flesh, I traveled through a number of countries for 5 years. Marceau put all of himself, body and soul, into each performance. Afterward, exhausted, he would lock himself away in his hotel room for many long hours. On the next day, without visiting the city, he returned to the theater to rehearse a new sketch or to correct the lighting. Alone in these countries, where often I did not speak the language, I visited museums, picturesque streets, and artist cafes. Little by little, I took on the habit of looking for esoteric bookstores where I could buy tarot. This was how I managed to put together a collection of more than 1,000 different decks, alchemical, Rosicrucian, Kabbalistic, Gypsy, Egyptian, astrological, mythological, Masonic, sexual, and so forth. All of them consisted of the same number of cards, 78, divided into 56 minor arcana and 22 major arcana, but each of them was illustrated differently. Sometimes the human figures were transformed into dogs, cats, unicorns, monsters, or gnomes. Each version included a booklet in which to its author proclaimed himself to be the bearer of a profound path. I did not grasp either the meaning or the use of these very mysterious cards, but I bore a great affection for them, and finding a new deck filled me with joy. Naively, I was hoping to find the one tarot that would transmit to me what I was so anxiously searching for, the secret of eternal life. During the course of one of my journeys to Mexico as Marceau's assistant, I made the acquaintance of Lenora Carrington, a surrealist poet and painter who had had a love affair with Max Ernst during the Spanish Civil War. When Ernst was imprisoned, Leonora went mad with all the horrors that implies, but also with all the doors that this malady opens in the prison of the rational mind. Inviting me to eat a skull made from sugar with my name carved on its forehead, she told me, "Love transforms death into sweetness." The bones of the skeleton of the 13th arcanum are made of sugar. When I realized that Leonora used the symbols of the tarot in her work, I begged her to initiate me. She answered, "Take these 22 cards, examine them one by one, and then tell me what you feel is the meaning of what you see." Overcoming my shyness, I obeyed her. She rapidly wrote down everything I said to her. When I finished with my description of the world, I was soaked in sweat. With a mysterious smile on her lips, the painter whispered to me, "What you just dictated to me is the secret, as each arcana is a mirror and not a truth in itself. Become what you see in it. The tarot is a chameleon." She then immediately made me a gift of the deck created by the occultist author Edward Waite, with its 19th century style drawings that later became very fashionable among hippies. I believe that Leonora, whom I viewed as a priestess, had given me the key to the luminous treasure at the core of my darkened interior without realizing that these arcana only act as stimulants of the intellect.